What are some paradoxes that make your brain hurt? Password incorrect. Change password. You can't use the same password. Probably the most relatable one for everyone. Simpsons paradox is one I struggle to fully wrap my head around. The basic idea is that a bunch of groups can all show one trend, but when combined, show the opposite trend. It makes sense in simple contrived examples, but when it comes to actually spotting it and fully considering the implications, my brain starts to stop working. One real world example was SAT scores in the United States in the late 20th century. People started panicking in the early 80s because average SAT scores showed a downward trend, leading to the idea that public schools in the US were failing. Turns out, if you broke down students into subgroups like race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, academic performance, etc., the average scores of each subgroup were actually improving. Average scores as a whole were getting lower because, since college was getting more accessible, more students from traditionally lower scoring subgroups were taking the SAT. For example, students from poor households, students with mediocre grades, etc. The supposed crisis did not exist. My migraine gives me neck pain, or my neck pain gives me migraines. This has been literally hurting my brain. To get experience you need job. To get job you need experience. As someone who has been on the hiring end of a lot of these decisions, I like to give this little tidbit when I see people bring this up. When a prospective employer is describing the requirements to fill an open position, don't think of that list as an absolute list of non-negotiable requirements. Think of it as a list of preferences for their ideal candidate. Ideally, everyone wants a new employee with experience. In reality, and especially nowadays with the employment market, sometimes the best applicant doesn't have much, or even any, experience. And that's okay from an employer's perspective, as long as they have an applicant that they like and think can do the job and has the necessary licensure if needed. That's enough. So, if you see a job you want, but don't meet all the requirements, apply anyway. If you are asked about the lack of experience in a specific area in an interview, explain what you do know about it from reading online. Explain how you are eager to learn more, and describe any tangentially related experience you might have. You will be pleasantly surprised by the opportunities this approach opens up in your job hunt. This works until the automated hour screening system just dumps your resume for not meeting the requirements at face value. If you don't have the required 5 years experience, it gets rejected before a human ever sees it. Alternatively, why would you advertise an entry-level position that isn't aimed at entry-level applicants? Sometimes those are set up deliberately to fail in order to get an H-1B employee for much cheaper. Sorry government, we tried, and there's just nobody we can find with our required 5 years of experience in exchange 2019. So let us bring someone over from India for minimum wage. Thanks. Adult Link learns the Song of Storms from the man in the windmill, who is angry because a kid played in once and messed everything up. Link goes back in time to play the song as young Link and becomes the kid who messes everything up. Where the heck does the Song of Storms come from? Only a Sith deals in absolutes. Never noticed, but you're right. It's sort of hypocritical to make a statement like that. Make a time machine and kill your grandfather. Your dad isn't born, and so you aren't born. You can't make the time machine, meaning your grandfather isn't killed, and your dad was born, and so you were born, and it loops forever, never ending. Hence the creation of a parallel universe theory. The OG universe timeline in which your grandfather is still alive exists, but now so does a second one, beginning from the moment where you go back in time. In one of those timelines universes, the main of which is the one where your grandpappy is alive, with the other being a branch indirectly created by you, in which you do not exist, since your grandpappy died before having a kid. So with this rule set applied to Back to the Future, from his family's perspective, it's the story of how a teenage boy went to meet an old man late at night and was never seen again. Time travel paradoxes are more contradictions than paradoxes, since we can't time travel yet and don't know how it would work. By finding a paradox, you're basically disproving how you think time travel works. The game Quantum Break had a really cool take on time travel. You can only travel back to the past through a time machine, and coming out a time machine. So time travel can never affect us until a time machine exists, at which point they still couldn't time travel before the point at which the machine was turned on. Oh, have I got a movie for you? Primer. Nesting instances of exactly this. Sabotage. Double crossing. You're going to need the online flowchart and a few repeat watchings to feel like you somewhat understand the movie. It's great. If you slowly replaced a ship with different parts, would it remain the same ship? This axe has been in the family for 200 years. The handle has been replaced 3 times and the head 5 times. I don't know if this is a paradox, so forgive me if not. Studies have shown brain activity up to 10 minutes before a person decides to do something. As in, they have a person hooked up and are recording his brain patterns. They see activity in a certain part of the brain associated with actions. And 10 minutes later, the person picks up a glass of water. This is part of Sam Harris's thesis on why we don't actually have free will. We aren't even aware of how our decision-making process works. And the part that leaves my brain struggling is if I'm not in my driver's seat. Who the heck is? The paradox of Gabriel's horn. A horn of infinite length and infinite surface area has a volume of pi. Math is so ducking cool. I wish I would have pursued it in college. My field has better job prospects, and I'd find it interesting, but math is just ducking fascinating. That there had to be a beginning to the universe. But what came before the beginning? What came before that? Don't give me Big Bang. Something led up to that too. There had to be a beginning, but at the same time there couldn't have ever been a beginning. It's not as simple as time being a linear thing without beginning or end. If you allow for time not existing prior to the Big Bang, this particular paradox goes away. Time itself is a very slippery thing to conceptualize once you dig into it. The easy way to get around it is to define time. What is time? It's really just how we observe the moment-to-moment state of the universe. With no universe by which to judge the passing of time or otherwise read no observer, then there is no time. Why does it say paper jam when there is no paper jam? As it should being scolded and told, mind your own business. And you only think about yourself. So which is it? What do you want me to do? What would happen if Pinocchio said, "My nose will grow now"? Nothing would happen. Saying something without knowing the outcome doesn't count as a lie. A lie has to be a deliberate non-truth. He is lying about the truth of him knowing what is going to happen. If you ask me about something I didn't know, and I faked an answer, even if it turned out to be the right answer, I still would have lied to you. The ducking double slit experiment. It might be called something different now. The experience shows electrons I think act differently when observed or not. But the part that got me was, even if the particles were recorded they knew and acted like they were being observed by humans. It breaks my brain to think about it. It makes me angry and paranoid at the same time, but I love it. It's so strange. I blame my dad. He showed me a video explaining the experiment, and it stuck with me most of my life. Remember that observed doesn't mean we looked at them or recorded them with a camera. You can't see photons unless they hit your eye. The process of observation has to interact with the photons in some way, which changes how they behave. I don't know if this counts or if I'm just stupid, but when Oscar said everything in moderation including moderation, he's saying that you should take things in moderation. Don't overdo them, but once in a while, allow yourself some excess as well. A good example would be monitoring your food intake all week, but also allowing yourself 1 or 2 cheat meals. Someone goes back in time to meet Beethoven, and they find out Beethoven doesn't exist. They had then published Beethoven's work under Beethoven's name, because they could live in a world without Beethoven. Well then, who made for realize? We all take reality so much for granted. What if this all is just another long dream? The moment you wake up to realize it was all a dream, how would you know if it is again a dream or not? Why the duck does checking your credit score hurt your credit score? Why the duck does paying off a credit card lower your credit score? Why the duck are major decisions being made by consulting this arbitrary score of alleged worthiness? In the game Chrono Trigger, the group is in the post-apocalypse and finds a record of the world being destroyed in the year 1999. They vow to use time travel bullshit to prevent the apocalypse, and that's the central hook for the game. But if they succeed, then there would never be a record for them to discover to send them on the journey to begin with. The grandfather paradox is for sure the one that makes mine hurt the most. Since you killed your grandfather, one of your parents aren't born, so you're not born. But since you're not born, you never travel back in time to kill your grandfather, so you'll exist. However, since you were born, you have the ability to go back in time and kill your grandfather. It's a never-ending loop. It could, however, possibly be explained due to the idea of parallel timelines and universes where it branches off from the original timeline universe. If you ask Rick Astley for the movie Up, he can't give it to you because he can't give you up, but meanwhile he is letting you down. I advise you to ignore my advice. Wilhelm Voigt: to get a job I need to have papers, and to get papers I need to have a job. This statement is false. If you could know the current exact position and velocity of every particle in the universe, then you should theoretically be able to calculate and extrapolate the data to predict any future event or know any past event. So if the data predicts that in 5 minutes you will stand up and fold your arms, what if you then decide not to do that? Is that even an option? You can't have perfect freedom and perfect equality. At some point, freedom impinges on equality and vice versa. That one stung when I first realized it. I don't know if it's a paradox, but the 3 doors riddle, where you get rid of one door and the chances selecting the right door are still multiply 33%. I'll never wrap my head around that. If they don't need a vaccine because God will protect them, why do they need a gun? You can't afford this mortgage for $800 a month, so we are going to force you to rent a shitty studio apartment for $1,500 a month. You starve if you eat yourself. I don't think the cause of death would be starvation. Christopher Nolan's Tenet is always a brain breaker for me. It's like, what if we actually played out the grandfather paradox but made it a core mechanic of the movie? I understand the movie now, but some moments I still can't wrap my head around, so I just feel it. It wasn't MAGA that attacked the Capitol on the 6th. It was Antifa pretending to be MAGA. Ashley Babbitt was shot and killed on the 6th at the Capitol. Ashley Babbitt was MAGA. Ashley Babbitt was murdered, unarmed, and a martyr. Ashley Babbitt was not Antifa. Ashley Babbitt was MAGA. Ashley Babbitt was attacking the Capitol on the 6th and was killed by police, stopping her from getting into the building. But it was Antifa breaking in, not MAGA. Antifa pretending to be MAGA, except Ashley Babbitt, who was a MAGA hero, but also she was Antifa. But also, if the universe has existed for forever, that means that there was literally an eternity before the Big Bang. But that means that there has to be an eternity inside an eternity. There's no evidence the universe has existed forever. 2 guards at a door. One always lies, and one always tells the truth. You ask them if there is certain death on the other side of the door. The one on the left says yes, and the one on the right says no. So you ask the one on the left if the other guard is lying. He says yes. Do you go through the door? I would phrase with, if I asked the other guard if this door led to certain death, what would he say? Then assume the opposite. The questions you asked are inconclusive. The first law of thermodynamics states, energy cannot be created or destroyed. So how is the Big Bang physically possible? You can get an infinite universe with infinite time, space, and matter from infinite nothing. A man asks a god who claims to be all powerful to make a rock that even he couldn't lift. If the god cannot make a rock that is impossible for him to pick up, then the god isn't all powerful, since he can't make a rock that he can't lift. If the god can make a rock he couldn't lift, then he can't pick it up, thus making him not all powerful. That one is actually more about, like, logical consistency than actual omnipotence. If you think that logical consistency is more powerful than this god's powers, then the god cannot make a rock that he cannot lift, because the idea of such a rock doesn't make sense. If you think that omnipotence doesn't have to follow the logic as we understand it, Then, the god makes a rock that even he can't lift, the god then lifts it anyway.